we're on to album number 5, guys.
Okay. So this is Camper Van Beethoven, and they are the first time we're covering them. This is Key Lime Pie. Comes in at number 647 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 59 in 1989, number 4,317 of all time. It is Camper Van Beethoven's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, and not making Rolling Stone's list, but they are ranked number 1,398 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And so I get first take here. So this, I mentioned this last week. This is a band that I had heard of, but didn't know any of their stuff. I mostly knew them because the main singer, David Lowery, was in another band that I was familiar with which was Cracker.
After this band, you said?
What's that?
Is Cracker after this band?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I believe this is their last record before they kind of broke up. And then Cracker was formed in the ashes of that. And then they
correct.
Brought back Camper Van Beethoven later on, like a lot of these artists are doing. They're like, hey, maybe there's some money we could make if we go on tour and let some of our albums marinate with some of our fans. But so I didn't know any of these songs, with the exception of Pictures of Matchstick Men. As soon as that song played, that's the cover. I was like, where did I hear that from before? And it was a psychedelic 60s song. By a band called Status Quo, which I didn't remember that, but when I heard that version, I was like, yes, I have heard that song before. So this is my record of the week. I love this album.
I had a feeling you would like it.
This is scratching so many itches for me. So you've got the violin. I think that's the first thing we should talk about, because it's basically the first song is like this kind of like. There's a lot of like that's kind of like a Civil War like march. There's a little. It's kind of a creepy sounding violin. There's a lot of creepy things happening this week with some of the songs. At times the violin sounds like this crisp, really melodic thing, and then there's other times where it's got this like a harsher, a little bit more of a menacing feel to it. And I would say that opening track kind of has that. It's like you're not exactly sure where this record's going to go. But man, there's some great songs in here. I don't think there was a song in here that I did. I mean, maybe the interlude, the 10th track, but that was like a minute-long instrumental that was barely even a song, but that's fine. But they're definitely. So I'm hearing some of the stuff that would make Cracker, right? You're hearing like some of the 90s alt rock that's happening here. There's definitely an Americana vibe as well, which I really like. Like Sweethearts is the 3rd track. That's the first time that really poked its head up, and so I like that as well. There is some harsh, it's not a hard album, but there's some parts of this album that are a little bit more what's the word, it is a little bit more, maybe there's it's not angry, like I'm thinking of a song like just Jack Ruby, which has kind of got this like a heavier, and I use that term loosely because it's not like it's metal or anything like that, but there's kind of like a tone that they have there, and like the way that they're playing that's kind of like out of like a darker undertone to it. But I thought this is another album with variety. It kind of goes in these different directions. I thought June was a fascinating song. It's got like 4 different parts to it, and some of it's like the main part of the melody is just this really upbeat, catchy part, but that's also got this droning kind of like guitar, darker guitar part at the very beginning, and then it goes in a totally different direction, more of the demented carnival like violin part again. But I like that. It just kept it interesting, and it was like, wow, that song's only 4 minutes and 20 seconds long. It seemed like they were packing a lot into that, that it should have been longer than that amount. But I really liked all the vibes that were going on here. I listened to this album probably 2 or 3 times. Also interesting in my listening experiences, I know John listens to Spotify as well, but this is one of those Spotify albums where not all the songs are on there. In fact, quite a bit were not available through Spotify, so I had to listen to this on Apple Music, which I don't get why they can have all the songs, but Spotify can't. Some weird label thing, but so that was.
It wasn't
a
on
little
Amazon
different.
Music at all. I had to go to YouTube.
Oh, really?
To listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they got some sort of, they signed a pact with the devil with Amazon, so they or with Apple, so they could be so they're fully on Apple. But I loved. I don't know if we're covering Kerosene Hat by Cracker in the 90s, but that's the album that I love that record as well. It's got similar elements to this. This is a little, I would say that this is a little bit I don't just throwing the violin in there, which is not in Cracker, makes this in the way that they used it, it makes this a little bit more avant-garde. So there's probably more stuff happening here than the Cracker record. But man, this is like it's. I liked every song on here, and it's just yeah, it's pretty much up my alley. So yeah, thumbs up for me. And I like his voice as well. He's got this. He's got a good voice, but it's a distinctive voice. It's a little raspy and crackly and whatnot, but I think it works well, and it even works well when he does a little bit more of like the more pleasant sounding, kind of poppier songs. So so yeah, big thumbs up for me. I really like this record.
Yeah, I was not as big on this album, I'll be honest. The first thing I wrote down was like, hello 90s. This is the 80s. Kind of this was a 90s album. And as a result, it had some things I like from the 90s and some of the things that I thought kind of wore me out about music in the 90s. The down tuning, sort of the muddiness of the sound, I think. It just there were periods of this album that I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked Sweethearts quite a bit. That's kind of sort of the more like alt country-ish type sound. I thought that was a good sound for them. Yep. Followed by I Was Born in a Laundromat. I thought that was the high of the album.
Yeah.
And then later on, the cover of Pictures of Matchstick Men was pretty good too. But there were some ponderous songs here, and I kept kind of saying to myself, because I know it's funny, because I know Camper Von Beethoven kind of started out as a band that had a lot of ska elements in it in their early years, like a lot. And that was kind of no, that was kind of how I remember them sounding. And I know what Cracker sounds like. And this is, I mean, we've been joking, but I hate to use the term proto, but this is absolutely proto Cracker. Like Matt said, this is kind of like a Cracker album, just take the violin out, which is okay by me because I never really saw the purpose for the violin on a lot of these. It just felt sort of like an add-on that you don't necessarily need at times. I want to stress, I did not dislike this album. It just was very mid for me in a lot of ways. I think it was shocking to me in our journey in the sense that I was like, okay, this is sort of like the first 90s sounding album, alt-rock album that we've really done. But that's such a familiar sound for me because of, how I grew up. And like one of the first notes I wrote was, I was like, all the things that I think will make this nostalgic for Matt are things that make it seem a little bit cliched for me. And I don't want to over, analyze Matt and I and stuff like that, but like I kind of was able to pick up pretty quickly, I think, like the resonation level. And because of the fact that Josh is a little younger than us and thus has a different frame of reference, I have no idea how this will hit him, and I'll be curious to see what he says. I've got some other observations, but I kind of want to play off of your comments. And I want to give some space for you, Josh, because I really am kind of fascinated by what you think of this album, because I had a pretty clear idea of how Matt was going to sound, and that's not to minimize it at all. But I'm always curious when I have no real take of what somebody's going to think on an album on our panel. And this one, I didn't have a read on you.
Yeah, in some ways, this is a pretty distinctly sounding album from a lot of the other stuff that we've listened to in the decade. I mean, it's clearly drawing on like country. Americana was the main genre signifier that came to mind immediately listening to this. The violin adds this Americana element almost like right off the bat. For me, they have this something that hasn't been mentioned is they kind of have this world music sound to them that gets incorporated in some tracks, like the opening theme and later on the Jack Ruby song I really liked, and has it sounds like how like it's got this like Western like music score that would be in a Western movie. It's got this kind of like epic feel to it, even though it's a story song about Jack Ruby. It's kind of this interesting sound to it. And the they meld the electric guitar along with the violin and these kind of country elements, and it worked well for me. I feel kind of in between both of you. I enjoyed the album, but as it went on, it kind of wore on me in the same way that maybe John felt about, or Matt felt about the Ocean Blue album. I feel like the front half was stronger and kind of captured what I liked about the album, whereas the second half felt kind of didn't add too much, and I don't know, wasn't the album as a whole wasn't strong enough for me to carry it all the way through. This band reminded me a lot of Wilco in some ways in terms of their sound. Also, they had a Decemberists flavor to them in some ways, although not as like, I don't know, not as kitschy maybe as the Decemberists can be labeled as. And the also, I don't know, the lead singer in some ways reminded me of Modest Mouse also. They don't sound the same like sonically, but there's some element there that band came to mind for. They overall, I think they kind of had this like melancholy tone to their lyrics and to their overall sound, which I don't know, feeds into the Americana for me in some ways. This is like a almost like nostalgic band for some era that didn't exist in my mind, or kind of like fictional,
like the early 90s for you. Nostalgic for the early 90s you didn't experience, like say Matt did.
Fictional, I don't know, like a fictional America or something. But it's I don't know, it's like I'm positive on it, but it's hard to wrap my head around it or to describe it. I enjoyed the music. I feel like it brought something different, especially compared to all the other albums this week. And I think ultimately I just kind of like the country Americana feel that it has. And we haven't, I guess, fully gone into like the Americana roots rock fully as a solid subgenre yet. But I guess that's coming in the 90s, I imagine.
Well, we've had elements of it, like Lucinda Williams and the
right.
Who was that? Oh, that band that we were all surprised by, that seemed like that we couldn't find, like the beginning with a B.
Oh, the one for the Blasters?
The Blasters, yeah, that was definitely kind of falling in that range as well.
Yeah.
There's some stuff from the Los Lobos record that had, there's elements of it, but the alt country movement hasn't really.
Right.
It started with the late 80s, probably with Uncle Tupelo. It's one of the forerunners of that.
It's interesting. I didn't get I definitely got elements of it, but I didn't get such a strong through line of the Americana and the all country that you guys did. It felt at times like straight ahead alternative rock to me too. Kind of.
Well, it depends on it depends on the
90s.
song. Like to me, it's like Sweethearts and When I Win the Lottery are pretty distinctive,
without a doubt. Yep. Yes,
songs. So
for
it's
sure.
It's not every song, but it's like, okay, there's a little bit here, and you throw the violin there the way that they use it, which is not always used as an Americana part. Like there's parts of it where they're actually layering the violin part, where what's more the smoother kind of sound against the guitars, which makes it more in a poppier song that kind of augments that. But
it's almost like another guitar part, like how they're using the violin. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like how you'd use a rhythm guitar, like, to supplement the main guitar. That's not what the violin's doing, but similar idea, but going up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think when you incorporate that, plus you've got more of a rock based kind of thing with like, When I Was Born in a Laundromat for sure, Jack Ruby, these songs that kind of do have that 90s alt rock grunge, even grunge to a lesser, lighter grunge extent. I loved all. I certainly make no bones about that. I am a child of the 90s and really got into a lot of that stuff. Even the generic stuff, like that was stuff that I still really gravitated towards. So it's you combine all those things together, and and the variety, again, it's not just one thing, it's several things all at once.
Yeah.
And I think generally they do a pretty good job, and it kept me interested. So I really did like it.
No, I get it. And I think I might have a little, and this is not, when I say this, Matt, this is not coming off like a prickish way of saying it or a judgy way, but my 90s rock ear, right, is not clouded by like, oh, I remember this song, and thus it's kind of like I have a little bit more discerning. Like I can remember, for example, when Cracker covered that Flaming Groovy song on the Clueless soundtrack, Shake Some Action, right, which I thought was a really good song. Yep. And the song Low, I mean, you can listen to Jack Ruby, right, and you can draw a pretty direct line to what they're doing with Low, right? You just add in a little bit more angst, right? And in terms of the guitar part and just the vocal styling, and there you go. You got it. So it's not an unpleasant sound for me. I found, like you, Josh, I found the second half of the album very like plodding. Like by the end, I was kind of like, I feel like I've heard all I need to hear from this.
Yeah.
And the gems on it were definitely in the first like 6 or 7 tracks. And I think another thing that stood out is the songs I didn't like. There's always a complement of a song in the style that I liked and a song in the same style that I liked less. And I'll give you an example. In the alt country lane, I really liked Sweethearts. And I also liked When I Win the Lottery, but not as much. And so like I always was able to draw a parallel between a song I liked and a song that sounded like it, but was like a lesser version of it. So, yeah, I mean, I could do other compliments there, but that was sort of there. And anytime they had something like opening theme, or interlude, those really did little to nothing for me. Yeah.
I mean, let's make no mistake. It's not like I love everything that was done in the '90s, or just you sound like.
Oh no, I don't think. Yeah, no, I don't think. I'd say.
Like, there's plenty of '90s stuff that I hated, but like there is a sound to it, and if it's done in a way that I just moves me, then I'm good. Yeah, then that's when the nostalgia. It comes out a little bit, but it's also it's more just about at the end of the day, what's the song doing? What's it? Is it moving me at all? And there was plenty of stuff here for me to sink my teeth into. So, but yeah,
I just don't think. I think a lot of people in the era they grew up in, they give a little bit of the opposite of a tax, right? A debit. They give a little bit of an extra debit to something that brings back the feels a little bit. I see it with like boomers, right? That like will remember everything in their era as being really good, even the stuff that's a lot more mid, right? But like they think it's above mid because it's their era they're in. And I just, for whatever reason, I've just never felt the need to have to give that extra debit or percentage, right, to the house for the 90s. But I know many people my age who will talk to them, and they don't give it to tracks from the 80s or the 00s or the 10s, right? But they will give that percentage to songs that fall in the same range. I'm not even talking about this album being in that, because I don't think it's fair to this album, but that was sort of the formula I'm saying. And I'm not even saying you're guilty of it, Matt. I think you're more self-aware than most, but it's just something I see a lot with Gen Xers, like
but
late
I would also,
Gen Xers especially.
I would also say that like I think that there's certain things, like if I hear something that sounds like this, like a '60s blues song that like just really I've liked the sound of that, and if there's like artists that come out today and goes back to that, I might be like, ooh, I like that. It's not, I wasn't around in the '60s. It's just a sound that I like.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. I don't know how much the nostalgia plays in that versus like it's just the familiar, the nostalgia of actually being there in the time when it comes out, I guess is what I'm saying, versus like something that you just like regardless of when it came out, and it's something that really you're really gravitated towards.
I kind of look at it like you're not going to fall in the line of like saying that Seven Mary 3 is good because you like other bands that do it, or like Godsmack is good because you like Alice in Chains, right? Like when people kind of go that far down it, you're like, wait a second, you have no discerning taste whatsoever.
Well, where I would say that I do fall into that is that there are more generic, quote unquote, not good or like not critically revered bands or like one hit wonder stuff that I have a little bit more of a soft spot for, because I was there when that song came out. I did like that song at that time. I don't sit back and ever went like, oh my God, that's a great, like Seven Mary 3 is a funny thing because there's some songs of theirs that I do like, but like I would never sit there and be like, this album's amazing or great or anything like that. It's just kind of like, yeah, this is like that more of a nostalgia thing for me. So that definitely can happen for sure. But it's not like automatically you hit the 90s sound and I'm like, I'm bought. It's because that's definitely like, I'm not a big fan of Marcy Playground, right? So,
well, but that's late 90s, and the nostalgia I think you have is more like early to mid, right? So like we do have to draw distinctions
but they were certainly a band that was going for that. That's the sound that they had, was trying to like take off of what was happening in the early mid 90s. So, but yeah.
Well, as a counterpoint, I don't have any. This album doesn't sound like the '90s to me, so I'll be interested to see what albums that come up do. This strictly
It will eventually, Josh. I can pretty much assure you that.
yeah. This sounds strictly like just in the Americana genre for me. Maybe quirky part of it, but that's my association at this point. So,
okay,
yep.
Fair enough.